Have you ever experienced something that just didn't make sense? Welcome to the world of glitch in the Matrix stories. Hit subscribe before the code rewrites itself and you forget you were ever here. Story 1. Unexplainable flash of light. My boyfriend and I were just watching TV and this burst of light just flashed in front of us in the bedroom. All blinds are closed, no way it was from a car or anything from around us. We both looked at each other like what the fuck was that we just saw, and usually I'm just the dramatic girlfriend, but it was eerie. Can't find any answers. Rewinded our show too to see if it was in it. Nothing was. Nothing weird throughout the house, but we do have two male gray cats and they were eyes wide open as well. Story 2. AirPod case that was right next to me vanished in a second. This happened 6 months ago and still bothers me almost every day. I was getting ready to leave the house one day and I'm using my AirPods. I placed the case on my bed. The bed has dark blue sheets, so I can very easily see the white AirPod case. The bed is made, it's flat. There is no way the case can get lost in the sheets. It's just sitting on top. I am the only person in the room, no pets either. I turn around for literally 1 second to grab my eyeliner, and when I turn back the case is just gone. I ripped my entire bed apart even though I know I only saw it sitting right there in that exact spot. I looked through every pillow, every blanket. I even went through my drawer and looked through the pockets of pants I haven't worn in years because I was so confused and desperate to find it. My bed has storage, so it's completely flat to the ground. There is no under my bed that it could have fallen to, if it could even fall in that 1 second. My entire room was in the hallway when I gave up looking. I've washed my sheets and cleaned my floor many times since then, and I still look to see if I can find them when I do, because it still makes me so mad and confused. It was right there, and then it was just vanished from this dimension in 1 second. I didn't believe in any type of glitch before this, and this is the one thing that made me question it. It makes absolutely no sense. There is nothing that could have happened in that 1 second for it to not be there when I turned back around. I still have the actual AirPods. They're sitting and waiting for their vanished home to come back one day. I got new ones since then, but I still kept those in case I ever found the case somehow one day, but I never did. Story 3. I heard my dad into the future. This happened about 12 years ago when I was around 17 and my little sister was about 7 or 8. She doesn't remember much of it, but I do, mainly because I think about it so often. It's one of those experiences that I can't explain, and for someone as skeptical as me, that's very unsettling. It was summer vacation, and I was babysitting my little sister while both my parents were at work. I have another sister, 2 years younger than me, but she wasn't home on that particular day. We lived on the second floor of an old Chicago townhouse, with a front entrance and a back porch that led directly into the kitchen. That day, my little sister and I were both in the living room, me watching TV and her playing some computer game. She was losing and let out a curse word, which, at the time, she was starting to do more often. She was usually a very well-behaved kid, but my parents were trying to break the habit by putting her in timeout whenever they caught her swearing. So, following their rule, I sent her to sit in the kitchen for 5 minutes. I kept watching TV, completely losing track of time. It wasn't until my show ended that I realized over 40 minutes had gone by. I felt awful as I rushed to the kitchen, ready to apologize for leaving her in there so long. But just as I got close, I heard something I really didn't expect. I heard whistling. It was strange for 2 reasons. First, I had never heard my little sister whistle before, and second, this wasn't just random whistling, it was a tune. A deliberate, steady melody. At first, I felt even worse, thinking I had left her there alone so long that she had managed to teach herself how to whistle. But as I stood there, listening, something started to feel off. The sound didn't seem like it was coming from my sister at all. It sounded older, deeper, familiar in a way. It sounded exactly like my dad. My dad did usually come in through the back door when he got home from work, so for a split second, I thought maybe he had gotten home early. But that didn't make sense. He wasn't due back for at least another 3 or 4 hours. Still, the resemblance was uncanny. The pitch, the rhythm, the way the notes lingered for just a second too long. It was his whistle. I started walking slower and started to get annoyed because I knew once my sister told him how long I'd left her alone in there for I'd probably be in trouble. I slowly poked my head in expecting to see both of them, but instead, I found my sister, alone and completely knocked out. Head resting on her arms, fast asleep. But the whistling was still going on. The sound was right there, filling the room. It wasn't coming from my sister. It wasn't coming from outside. It was just there. I don't remember how long I stood there, listening, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Eventually, I ran to the back door, yanking it open, expecting to see someone standing outside. No one was there. I ran to the windows, looking down, looking around. Nothing. But the entire time, that damn whistling never stopped. It was still in the kitchen, even as I stepped out onto the porch, even as I backed away. It wasn't following me, it was staying in the room, right where I had left my sleeping sister. I panicked. I grabbed my sister, barely waking her up as I carried her out of the house, and ran straight to my friend's place down the street. I waited there until my mom got home. When I told her what had happened, she brushed it off. She barely reacted, didn't seem to care, and honestly, that made me feel even crazier. So I just stopped talking about it. I never told my dad or my other sister. But here's the part that still makes my stomach drop whenever I think about it. A few days later, when my dad did come home from work, he walked in through the back door, and he was whistling the exact same tune I had heard in the kitchen days before. The exact same one. I don't have an explanation. I've thought about every possible logical answer, but nothing fits. It wasn't an echo, it wasn't someone outside, and it definitely wasn't my sister. I've never told anyone this story since, but I still think about it all the time. Story 4. Grocery shopping time glitches. The reason why I'm stopping to write this is I experienced a couple of time glitches this morning when at the grocery store. The first one happened when I passed an employee walking slowly heading to the front while I was heading to the back. It was about halfway when we passed each other, and I didn't stop and came out of the aisle to see the same employee walking out from the back when I just passed her going down the aisle. Later, when I was checking out and leaving the checkout area, a girl who looked strange was just starting to check out at the self-checkout behind me as I was leaving the store. When I am halfway down the front store aisle to the exit and she's already exiting, way ahead of me. Spent most of today trying to explain it away, and I've experienced time glitches before, but they weren't so obvious as the ones experienced today. I'm posting just in case there were other obvious stories that happened today. Story 5. I jumped ahead of route on my work today, ended up on the next road without turning there. I am house sitting and have been for the past week. I drove to work this morning, but I know this route very well despite being back roads. I have no need for Google Maps to get there. It was 5:43 in the morning when I left, and I own a pet sitting business so I don't need to shower and get ready for early morning visits. I can just throw on clothes and go. So, albeit I was still getting with the program mentally, I turned onto the first side street off the main road for my route. This side street is about a mile long. It's dark out, so I double-checked the street sign. It's the correct road. I traveled down it for a while. It's dark out and there is snow on the ground, so granted things look different. But I start thinking, there should be houses by now. And I've definitely driven further than a mile. I see a car approaching behind me in my rear view, so I pull over to turn on Google Maps. It tells me point 2 up the road I turn left on a road that I am familiar with as it is part of my route of back roads. But not the road I am expecting to be next. Also, it's definitely not the correct direction I should be turning next. Thinking it's early morning and I've just confused, I get back on the road, and when I get to the end of the road and have to turn left or right, I realize, somehow I didn't ever come to the end of that first side road and turn right. I somehow skipped ahead to the next road and had to turn left. I know exactly where I am at this point, obvious landmark and street sign, and all the roads and landmarks after that are as norm. That first side street I took off the main road is just woods until the last 1/4 mile when there are very recognizable houses, and then I turn right. That never happened. I kept going on, and when I felt lost and confused and checked maps, I was on the road I would have had to have turned right on after that first side street. And quite a ways down it. So logically, I know it was early morning and I do sometimes zone out when I drive. But if I zone out, I tend to miss turns. I was looking for my turn the whole time. I paid attention to the clock when I got to my next client's house. I was 2 to 3 minutes past arrival time. I had pulled over and checked the map, so that tracks. No missing time there. IDK. So strange. Nothing like this has ever happened before. I hope I explained it well enough. It's nothing exciting, but bizarre because I know I never turned off that first side street. I may not have been fully alert, but I was looking for the landmarks before my turn and they never appeared. Story 6. Jacket took a trip. Last summer I took my family on a cruise to Bermuda. I remember packing and looking at the weather. I packed a bunch of shorts and tees, but also 2 pair of nice pants and some collared shirts so my wife and I could do a nice dinner one night while my parents watched our 3-year-old. This was not my first cruise, so I knew I may need a light jacket for at night on the deck. I packed my quarter-zip pullover. It's from a fundraiser golf outing my fraternity had a few years ago. There's maybe 60 in existence that are exactly like it. I packed it specifically over any other pullover because I've been lucky to run into fraternity brothers from chapters all over the country who spot my letters. I figured, why not on a cruise? We left Saturday afternoon from Manhattan. My wife and I picked Monday night to have our date as it was the last night before we made it to Bermuda, and we wanted to make sure we didn't have reservations on other nights in case we were enjoying Bermuda and couldn't make it to the boat in time. It was cooler out that night, so after getting my nice pants and shirt on, I put my pullover on before we left for dinner. We walked the ship a little, then decided to get our photos taken. I took my jacket off and placed it on a chair in the photo studio. My wife placed her clutch on top. When we were done, we grabbed our stuff and went to the restaurant. I put my jacket on the back of my chair and we enjoyed our dinner. Once done, we headed back to our room where my parents had just put our son to sleep. We had drinks we planned to enjoy on our balcony. This is when I realized I didn't have my jacket. I went back to the restaurant, which was closing, and asked if anyone turned a jacket in. I showed them a picture of it and they said no, but to check the lost and found at guest services. I checked with guest services and they didn't have it either. I figured maybe it'll show up in a day or two. We went about our cruise. I checked back on Wednesday night and Friday before we packed up. We dug through all of our laundry and suitcases and it was simply gone. I also didn't have any other jackets, so it wasn't just like a mistake that I brought a different one. I also asked my parents and sister and her husband if they saw it, and the answer was again no. I was kind of pissed because I thought someone took this jacket that, unless they were in my fraternity, would mean nothing to them. We got home, unpacked, and did our laundry. It was still nowhere to be found. About 4 months later, I was packing for a work trip and I knew I'd need a pullover, so when packing I went to the area in our closet where I keep my pullovers, and there it was, hanging like it never left. I talked to my wife as we just got back from a different beach trip where I complained I didn't have my pullover, and here it was. I asked her if she saw it come back from the cruise and she swore no. She would have said something because she knew how upset I was. She also said she didn't see it go to the beach either, as at that point it was still gone. Story 7. How my cat adopted me as her mom, and the strange events that happened that day. Longtime lurker of this sub, first time posting here. Please forgive me in advance for any grammatical language mistakes since English is not my first language. Hello all, I am a philosopher teacher. I live in Mexico City. I am half Mexican, half Italian. This will be relevant to the story I am going to tell you. I don't drink alcohol or use drugs, no history of mental illness. Back in 2017, I lived in the same house I live now. I lived alone and happy with my books and my 2 cats. A tuxie cat named Gordita and Ronnie, a big Siamese kitty. One particular and sunny April morning, I was at work, but I left early because there was a workers' strike at the university where I teach. Some colleagues offered me to go for a coffee to discuss the conflict that was happening that day, but I refused, and the reason why I refused was that I felt a very strange and urgent need to go back home. I feel this intuition, this force that was leading me or pushing me to go back home. Now, I returned home feeling uneasy, since I only had 2 or 3 times this feeling in my life. This intuition, this strong gut feeling. I felt almost scared of how powerful and unexplainable was that urgent feeling of coming back home. I was in this state of slight distress when I pulled the key of my apartment, and when I opened the door I saw in the hallway a very tiny calico stray kitten, a very small kitten. She had a swollen ear and looked malnourished. At that moment I approached her immediately and I told her, "Hey sweetie, who are you? Are you hurt?" Then in the blink of an eye she ran into me. And since the door of the apartment was already opened, she literally stormed into my apartment. She ran into the living room, and here's the part that left me totally confused and in shock. I followed her into the living room. She stopped for a moment, locked eyes with me, and in my mind I literally heard a voice? A message? I can't fully describe what it was, but it was in something that was both in broken Spanish and broken Italian. My 2 native languages, that could be translated as, "This my house. You my mom." I felt that I was going crazy. I felt that my stomach sank. Then seconds after this happened, the kitty so casually went into the window of the living room and she sat there ready to take a nap under the sun. Like she already knew that this was going to be her favorite place. My 2 other cats came to see what was happening and they looked at her with this huge WTF cat look in their faces. Gordita looked at her curiously and Ronnie was also totally confused. Now, I was still in shock about the words or voice that I listened in my head. I had to sit down for a moment since I recognized my own inner voice, the voice of my inner monologue, and this was different, as crazy as it sounds. Yes, it was the kitty, talking, telepathically to me. Well, when I calmed myself down, 2 hours later I went to buy kitten food and a new cat bed. I ran into one neighbor and I told her what happened. My neighbor told me that she saw the kitten since the early morning and was smelling and trying to get into my door. That was 8 years ago, and indeed I become her mom. Her name is Padokia and I love her with all my heart, and she and I have a very strong connection. She follows me everywhere. We are so very close to each other. I haven't heard her voice again, but I feel that I can communicate with her beyond words. I feel also that she astral projects her into my dreams. What would have happened if I didn't come back home early that day? Did I feel her presence in advance? Did something similar happen with your fur babies? Story 8. The Vanishing Key. Hey, y'all. I've finally got a story to post here after lurking for a while. So, I work for a company that test drives cars, and although I legally can't tell you what I was driving at the time, I can say that it uses a key card instead of an actual key to lock, unlock, and drive the vehicle. About a month ago, I'm finishing up my paperwork after getting back into the lot at the end of my shift. After I've checked to make sure I've finished everything, I grab my paperwork, the key, and my personal belongings. For context, I was wearing a thin, gray coat zipped up and then a proper winter coat over top that was unzipped. I always keep my personal keys and wallet in the left pocket of the winter coat, and my phone in my right pocket. As a result, work keys go into the left pocket. This night, I got out of the car, made sure it was charging, and then locked it. I then fumbled putting it into my pocket, but picked it up off of the snow and shook it a bit to get some snow off and just shoved it into my right pocket. I left my hand in there because it was a bitterly cold night, well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and made the short walk to the building. I get inside, finish the last of my paperwork, and walk over to one of my bosses who was sitting on a chair underneath the key rack. He begins checking over my paperwork and I take the car key out of my pocket and hang it up. I distinctly remember doing this and the way the melting snow shifted in the protective plastic case as I hung it up. My boss finishes checking my paperwork, tells me I'm all good, and I put the papers onto the paper tray, finish my time card, put that in my clipboard away, and grab my stuff and leave, making sure to glance at the key rack to double check that I had put the key away, and it was there. I get back to my dorm and do my usual after work routine of feeding the cat, putting my keys and wallet on the bedside table, hanging up my winter coat on a rack on the closet, hanging the other coat up on one of the posts at the foot of my bed, plugging in my phone, and unpacking my small personal bag. I then head into my shared bathroom to use it and take a shower, but I get a call just before heading into the shower. I grab my phone and see it's from my boss, who asks if I hung up the key, and I tell him the truth. Yes, I did. He tells me it's not there. I rifle through my winter coat pockets real quick but find no key, and I tell him that. He sounds super confused and says that he'll keep looking back at base and for me to keep looking around my dorm. After my shower, I find that I have gotten a text from my other boss saying that she has been informed that I have lost a key and that I need to find it before my next work shift. I quickly type back that I hung it up and 100% do not have it. Still, I rifle through the pockets of both my jackets. I check my pants pocket, my bag, do a quick sweep of my small dorm room and find absolutely no key. It's around 4 a.m. at this point, so I head to bed. I wake up around 1 or 2 p.m. to another text from my boss saying that I in fact did not hang up the key and that I need to find it. Cue more pocket searches, bag searches, clothes searches, and once again no key. I check the parking lot as I'm walking to my car for my shift, and check my car, but find nothing. At work, myself and the shift lead both swept the driver's room and the parking lot both before and after everyone else left in their cars, and got the manufacturers to unlock the car for them and check there, despite the fact that you can't lock the car from the outside without a key. I was assigned that same car and left after 2 hours since I couldn't drive that night. The next day, my dad visited me at my dorm and helped search my dorm and my car, but again no key. I worked again that night and was assigned a different car. The key for the other one had not been found. It's been a month and I have used those coats and the pockets multiple times. The clothes I wore have been washed and reworn, my bag has been cleaned out, and the driver's room at work is used daily, and multiple people have been searching for that damn key. I know I hung up that key that night. I know that at least one of my bosses believes me on that point. I haven't been punished, thankfully. Occasionally, someone will ask me if the key has turned up, and all I can do is shrug my shoulders and say that no, I haven't found it. The vehicle was down for a week until a new key arrived from the manufacturer. To this day, I have no idea what happened to that thing. Another key to a different car but the same make and model also disappeared under mysterious circumstances a week ago, and the bosses are starting to get a bit worried. It waits to be seen if another key will dematerialize into the ether or not, but my coworkers and I are joking that they got taken by the fairies. Also, you need a passcode to get into the building and all doors chime when they are opened. The front door is right next to the office that my boss would have been in if someone came inside. The back door opens into a parking lot surrounded by a barbed wire fence with a sliding gate that also requires a passcode and beeps when opened and closed, plus a window from the office looks out onto the area where a vehicle or person would be to type in the passcode. All of this to say, the keys being stolen are basically impossible. A coworker would also have no reason to steal a key except out of spite, but also, I was the last one out that night. Nobody else came in or out the night it vanished. The boss that was there that night is the one who believes that I hung it up, also. We are all so confused, and I'm just glad that I didn't get into trouble. This will probably get filed into my mind as a life is strange thing and just become something that I randomly think about and just shrug my shoulders at. But still, where in the hell did those keys go? Story 9. All our spoons are different. All the spoons in our house have changed. We had 8 normal tablespoons, from buying 2 different cutlery sets of 4. With just 2 of us living here, we only ever used 2 at any given time. A few days ago, we came down for breakfast, opened the drawer, and in place of the 8 normal tablespoons were 8 soup spoons. We've never owned soup spoons, and unless my wife is playing some weird trick, even though has next to no sense of humor, and is getting seriously mad about the lack of normal spoons, we have no idea what happened to the tablespoons, and where the soup spoons came from. No one had been over that night to change them. Story 10. Self-cleaning coat. When I was a teenager I had this plaid wool coat from PacSun that I absolutely loved, but one day I slid on some mud down a hill and the thing ended up being completely covered in mud and grass stains and became unwearable. I needed to take it to a dry cleaner but I was super poor, so I put it in the back of my closet and forgot about it. Later on when I was moving, foreclosure, I pulled it out and there wasn't a spot on it. The thing looked brand new. I asked everyone in my family and they had no idea what I was even talking about. Not the craziest story, but I still have the coat and no explanation for it. Story 11. Daughter appeared in my locked room. I still can't explain this. About 3-ish years ago when my daughter was around 4, I had a sitter over and I went in my room to get ready to leave. I closed and locked the door, and I specifically remember making sure it was actually closed all the way and fully locked. A few minutes go by and I hear my daughter at the door loudly jiggling the handle trying to get in and calling for me. I was around the corner in the bathroom and when I came out maybe a minute later to let her in she was just standing there right inside the room. The door was still closed and locked behind her. I never heard the door open or close. I asked her how she got in and she just stood there and said, "I don't know." It really freaked me out. I asked the sitter if she saw anything but she was in the other room and didn't know what happened either. Maybe there's a logical explanation but I haven't been able to come up with one. Story 12. 2 new trees. Not sure if this qualifies as a glitch but it's tickling my brain. I live in a small town in the mountains and over the summer I was driving down to the big city, where we do all our shopping and errands that we can't do in town. I've made this drive roughly twice a month for 5 years, but this time I noticed an unusual pine tree right by the road. I was struck by how perfect it was, straight and symmetrical. It stood out from the other trees. I thought maybe they put in one of those fake tree phone towers, but it was real. Something about it just held my attention. Fast forward to fall, I'm driving to work and I notice another of these unusual trees in the distance, perfectly framed by the horizon right at the crest of the hill. Again perfectly straight, almost symmetrical, but so eye-catching I'm in disbelief that I've never noticed either of these trees before on routes that I take on a daily and monthly basis. Since then I've been keeping an eye out for more unusual trees, but while I've seen trees that are as straight and symmetrical, or well placed and catching the sun just right, none of them have the same arresting quality that the first 2 have. Has anyone else noticed a new object in a familiar place that just couldn't be new? Did it have an unusual feel to it? Story 13. Heard my sister laughing in room when she wasn't there. This may not be a major glitch or anything, but I got back home from work, and the door to my sister's room was open, and I heard her, clear as day, talking and laughing on the phone. I usually stop by her room to say hi, but this time I went straight to my room. A couple of hours pass by, and I assume she's sleeping or something because she hasn't left her room at all, so I don't bother checking in. Then I'm just relaxing in the living room when she walks through the front door after a whole day at work. She wasn't at home at all when I heard her in her room, but I definitely heard her voice and laugh. It was very strange. Story 14. I received a package from my future self. It started on Tuesday. I'd been working from home that day, nothing unusual, just another routine day. When I opened the door to grab the mail, I found a medium-sized box with my name and address written in elegant, almost flawless handwriting. It wasn't the type of package I was expecting, and there was no return address or anything to indicate where it came from. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was some sort of mistake or an order I forgot I placed. I brought the box inside and opened it carefully, only to find a neatly folded letter inside. The letter was dated 2025, a year into the future. I was floored. I thought it was a prank at first, but the contents of the letter left me stunned. It was a message written by myself, or at least, that's what it claimed to be. It went into detail about some of the most private thoughts I'd been dealing with, things I hadn't shared with anyone. It even mentioned events I was struggling to avoid or fear in my life, specific situations that I was about to encounter. The letter gave me instructions on what to do to avoid a big mistake, things I should watch out for, and which person I should reach out to for help, someone I hadn't talked to in years. At the end of the letter, it said, "Do not ignore this. Trust yourself. You'll know when the time comes." I've seen it, but the strangest part? There was an object in the box, a small, simple keychain. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was a trinket that seemed so insignificant, but when I looked closer, I realized it was something I had lost years ago, a gift from a close friend who passed away. I couldn't explain how it was in that box or what any of this meant. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no way this was a coincidence. I followed the letter's instructions cautiously, reconnecting with people, making decisions I didn't think were possible. Some things have fallen into place, but it still feels like I'm waiting for something big to happen. I don't know who sent the package. Was it really from my future self? Or was it some elaborate prank? Either way, the whole experience has made me believe in the possibility of things I can't explain. Story 15. Shapeshifter in the mountains. Me and my boyfriend were in the mountains in Poland. The way you get into the mountains is horse-drawn carriages. So we were in the area where everyone was waiting for the carriages to come and pick us up to take us back. I was on the edges of the woods looking for bugs. Everyone else was waiting on the road. There was a decent amount of people there, so multiple carriages were needed. I noticed an older lady go into the woods. I specifically noticed this because no one else was venturing into the woods. Everyone else was patiently waiting on the road, or staying at the edge of the woods. And it was even weirder because she was going in alone. I was on the edge of the woods near where she went in. Then my boyfriend said he heard a hissing sound coming from the woods. I joked, maybe it was that lady that went into the woods. As soon as I said that, the person came out of the woods. My boyfriend looked perplexed and said, "You mean the man?" The person looked exactly the same, wore the same jacket, had the same build, except this time the hair was shorter and the face was obviously male. I said, "That's weird. I could have swore that he was a lady when he went in." I remember them having a woman's haircut and being a woman, but I assumed I was just crazy. Then my boyfriend said, "Yeah, I saw a lady go in too." I'm really confused. They're even wearing the same jacket. We kept watch to make sure two people didn't go into the woods and we mixed them up. But no one else came out of the woods. The carriage came and the man got on it, all alone. There were too many people, so we had to wait longer for the next carriage, and still, no lady came out of the woods. I would have assumed I was seeing things, but my boyfriend clearly saw it too.